Welcome to She Plays Weekly. I'm Preston Bradsher. Let's get into what's happening in women's sports this week. Sabrina Ionescu got the first triple-double in New York Liberty history on Tuesday, with 26 points, 12 assists, and 10 rebounds. She's also the youngest player in WNBA history to record a triple-double. If you were worried about Ionescu getting up to pro level coming off her early injury last season, go ahead and don't. There are times when a new player gets a ton of hype and then doesn't live up to the expectations when game time comes, but this is not one of those times. Number 11, Santa Clara, pulled off a huge upset over number 1, Florida State, in the NCAA Women's Soccer Tournament Monday night, in an incredible game that ended in penalty kicks. This is the Broncos' first championship win since 2001, and they made it happen by hitting all 4 of their penalty shots, while Florida State somehow hit the post twice, which seems like terribly bad luck, but I guess the universe was cheering for the underdog this time. And now they have 2 national championships apiece, so they're even. We're building a beautiful rivalry here. 144, the new documentary about last year's WNBA bubble, came out this week. It was produced by Chiney Ogwumike and filmed by a tiny crew in the bubble, and people are loving it. It's full of important stories and insights into the big moments that went down last season, and the quality is seriously impressive, especially considering all the pandemic limitations they were working around. It's a pretty sharp contrast to this TV coverage of the Mercury Sun game on Sunday, which looks like it was filmed on a Motorola Razr. In our weekly upsetting NCAA news, the Women's Golf Regional in Louisiana was canceled last week due to rain and standing water. The course was deemed playable, but not championship-level playable, sparking a huge outcry among the players, especially the ones who just had their senior seasons ended for no reason. The only funny thing about this whole ordeal was how clearly the NCAA officials knew they were doing something bad. They looked like every cartoonish evil leader from the movies. They ducked out of their clubhouse/fortress, ruined everybody's day from high upon their tall staircase, then ran back inside before anyone could make them explain themselves. I'm getting strong, cowardly dictator vibes here. Not sure if that's what they were going for. 19-year-old Iga Swiatek defeated Karolina Pliskova to win the Italian Open this week, taking the championship match with a score of 6-0, 6-0. This is apparently called a double bagel. I'm very much still learning my tennis terms, but I am a big proponent of food-based sports slang, and I want more of that in my life. So, I propose we call a draw in soccer a banana split from now on. A double-double in basketball is now a Big Mac, and a hole-in-one in golf will now be exclusively referred to as a donut hole. Who do I talk to about this? The NWSL regular season started on Saturday, and the theme was ties. And scoreless ones, specifically. Every team in the league not called Portland scored a grand total of 3 goals combined over the weekend, while the Thorns made a statement with their 5-0 defeat of the Chicago Red Stars. Those numbers might be looking up, though, as it was announced this week that Sam Mewis and Rose Lavelle will be returning to the league from their stint with Manchester City. Let's just hope they bring some goals with them. And finally, Sport Bigs launched a new line of toys dedicated exclusively to women's sports this week. The talking plush toys are inspired and voiced by real-life athletes, including Lori Lindsay, Rebecca Brunson, and Lisa Fernandez. They have a bunch of inspirational phrases for children that they say. Things like, "You're awesome," and "Eat your broccoli." They're trying to give little girls the kind of sports toys little boys have, and they're even donating some of the profits to support women's sports. It's all very cool, and I was 100% on board until I saw how big they are. These things are 18 inches tall. Hang on, I have a visual aid. 18 inches. That's too big. Have we not learned a lesson about letting large dolls into our homes? We've got a great show for you tonight. Lindsay Gibbs is here, plus we'll highlight some of the rookies who crushed it last weekend. But before we get to that, the WNBA is now in its 25th season, which in comparison to other women's sports leagues is a whole lot of years. But the coverage still isn't quite there. The players have done all they can, so now it's time for sports media to step up. For more on that, let's take a deep dive. This past year has been unique for everyone, especially in sports. Last year, the WNBA bubble gave us way more than just exciting basketball. The players took a stand against racial injustice. We saw protests and campaigns, and people actually paid attention. No one can get stuff done like the WNBA. They set the standard across all sports for activism and athlete-driven change. Every other league, men, might want to take notes. But regardless of the players' efforts to get their league into the national spotlight, the sport still isn't getting the coverage it deserves. The league is growing at an alarming rate, but there's no room for growth. There are so many talented players that got left off WNBA rosters yet again last week because the league is working with such limited resources that they can't afford them all. The league needs expansion, but for that to happen, they also need to expand coverage. As we know all too well, only 4% of sports media coverage is dedicated to women's sports. I won't even begin to go through any of the typical excuses for this because at this point they're all BS. All I can say is give the people what they want already. Last year's regular season ratings were up 68%, and this year's opening weekend is already up 25% from there. That's like a lot, okay? Don't try to tell me there's no demand for women's sports. The problem is in the supply. Last year, during what was arguably one of the most thrilling playoff seasons in WNBA history, they only received 3.1% of sports media coverage. I don't remember anything else that was happening during that time. Were the NBA, NFL, MLB, and NHL seasons really that exciting? Because I couldn't tell you a thing that happened over there. I was busy. The WNBA was just a little sliver when they could have been the whole damn pie chart. You would think, as much as the reach of the league has grown, that they would start to get the content they deserve, like a whole segment on ESPN, or at least some decent post-game coverage, instead of cutting straight to cornhole the minute the final whistle blows. If you want people to watch more women's sports content, give them something to watch. The broadcasters, like Rebecca Lobo, LaChina Robinson, Ryan Ruocco, Holly Rowe, and Pam Ward, are doing their best, but they don't have enough or the right resources to do right by the players. They can pick one story and comment on the game as best they can, but they won't even scratch the surface with what little they are given to give the world the stories that they want. We've already seen how fast this league can grow when the content is out there, and if you build it, they'll come, right? So let's build it. We thought that maybe the major sports networks just needed a little push to get some real WNBA coverage going. So here are some free show ideas from me to you. All right, number 1, a weekly show that gives the rundown of everything happening in the WNBA that week. Let's call it the Inside Scoop, or maybe even the Inside Hoop if you're feeling fun. You get everything from scores to standout players to predictions for upcoming games. Everything you need to know about what's happening on the court. There are approximately 8 million of these on the men's side, so I know we can make this happen. Number 2, Behind the Backboard. This is a behind-the-scenes look at the WNBA. Everything from player stories to locker room chats to off-the-court campaigns and protests the players have championed. Throw in a little TikTok and social media content to get people entertained and excited about watching these stories unfold on the court, and you've got yourself a hit show. And number 3, give Sue Bird a mic already. Call it whatever you want, just do it. The people will watch, I promise. There you go, ESPN. Take this and run with it, I dare you. That was your deep dive. We'll be right back with Lindsay Gibbs. Our guest tonight is the founder of the Power Plays newsletter and co-host of Burn It All Down podcast, and just generally an excellent sports journalist that you should know about. Lindsay, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for being here. So Power Plays, I've been reading it. I was telling you off camera, I've been reading it for a long time. I love it. You should read it if you don't, people out there. But for people who don't know what that is, could you just talk a little bit about what it is, how it got started?
Yeah, so I launched it. Oh my gosh, it's been like a year and a half now, which is wild. So I call it a no bullshit newsletter about sexism, etc. in sports. But really it takes a big picture look at issues affecting gender and bias in sports. And we really like to focus in on media coverage, on activism, on the big zoom out issues that we often don't think about that impact how we're watching sports on a daily basis. So I love it. I mean, it's cheesy, it's the name, but we're looking at the power players, right? Who are driving the driving force.
Yeah, and I mean, we get a lot of coverage of like the day-to-day kind of like gritty stuff, but that's important too to have the like more zoomed out view. I love that. Why did you choose the newsletter format? I was interested in that specifically for this kind of work.
Well, so I I definitely got pushed into it by some people
Yeah.
who were friends with me. I had been working at a site called Think Progress for about 4 or 5 years. There, I'd covered full time the intersection of sports and politics, and a lot of what I covered there was gender and sports. And I lived in DC, so I got to cover a lot of women's sports, the Washington Mystics and the Washington Spirit, and just be on hand for a lot of great moments in women's sports while I was there. And when Think Progress shut down, and I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do next, I had a connection at Substack. I know a few people who had started a Substack newsletter and really thought that it would be a good venue for what I wanted to do. And it took me a little bit to kind of flesh it out, right, and figure out, like, I wanted to have a very clear direction. But once I started really thinking about focusing on these big picture issues in women's sports, I decided to go for it. And I didn't know if it was going to work. It was very much a little bit of a Hail Mary, it felt like, but it's been great. I fully supported myself with it now for a year and a half. My readers are the most patient and understanding and wonderful people in the world.
That's
And
me. Wow.
that's you, yeah. And I'm really excited. We're pivoting to some stuff this summer that I just cannot wait to unveil. And what a journey it's been. People say, we all hear all the time, nobody cares about women's sports, right? There's no space for this coverage. But the newsletter has been one of the top sports newsletters in all of Substack, and it's just about women's sports. So I think that proves, like, there is an audience.
Yeah, and it's amazing the freedom that kind of format gives you to just be like, I don't care if you want to pay me to write about this. Like, you go Substack and Patreon, things like that are like reader funded are great for that kind of stuff, because you get to prove, like, regardless of what these like powerful media companies say, this is what people really want to read, and I can prove it because they're paying me to make it.
And this was my calculation going into it, because
Yeah.
I had a few other opportunities at places that I would have primarily covered the NFL, which I do. Like, I love football, I watch men's sports too, but where I could have or been a beat reporter. And I could have fought behind the scenes. People would tell me, we're open to some more women's sports coverage if you can, as you see things you want to pitch. And so I thought I could go in somewhere and spend my time fighting for the right to cover this, right? Or I could use that fight just to cover it, right? Just to do my own thing. And instead of using all that energy just to, fight the powers that be, I could use that energy covering the powers that be.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of my calculus, and it's been freeing. And I mean, look, I've been very lucky. Sometimes you have to time these things right, and I certainly got lucky with that. But it's mainly the fact that people care. Like, there is an audience for this. It's grown since I started it. Seeing the coverage landscape, I'm actually having to pivot a little bit, which is exciting because the coverage landscape is now so much more extensive for women's sports than it was when I launched Power Plays, a year and a half ago. So I'm seeing other places that have more resources than I do, that are covering some things that I was covering better and more extensive than I can cover it. And so then I get to pivot and say, okay, well, I don't want to just be a copycat here, or I don't, not a copycat, but I don't want to, people aren't going to pay for this if they can go elsewhere and get the same thing. So I have to keep pivoting and keep filling holes in the coverage that I think, other places aren't doing. And that's such, like, what a gift, what a great challenge.
What a good problem to have.
Yeah, it's a great problem to have, for sure.
Oh, well, and outside of that, which is clearly a lot, you're also a co-host of the Burn It All Down podcast. Could you just briefly explain what that is for people who don't know what that is?
Yeah, so we call it the Feminist Sports Podcast You Need. It is myself and 4 other women in sports. We've been doing this podcast every week for 4 years now, which is kind of mind-boggling. And yeah, it's wonderful. We talk about men's sports, women's sports, issues in sports, every thing. Each week we kind of take a deep dive into a different topic in sports and kind of a conversational roundtable. We bring in guests for interviews, and we have our burn pile where we throw things into the fire that are frustrating us in the sports world, which it's never hard to come up with many things.
There's always something.
Yeah, but I would say that has been, the rock of my career and kind of my life for the last 4 years. We laugh at how much has changed in all of our lives over the past 4 years, and yet this show that we've done 100% virtually most of the time, has just been such a constant for us, and just continues to challenge us. And once again, our listeners are the absolute best. We would look at it started once again by looking at a space that needed filling. You would look at the top 100 iTunes charts for sports, and it was just all men, like all men. And so, we really wanted to counter that.
Yeah, and I love the work you're doing. Clearly I'm also doing it in my own way of like, we need more coverage. Let's get it out there. We've got to do it. And you're definitely someone who's been out there in the trenches for such a long time that people like me who are younger can really look up to you. And I just wanted to say, I really appreciate you for that reason. This is cool. This is a cool time. I love this time in women's sports.
It's such an exciting time. And I'm getting to see people now the people that I started out with in industry who are now doing huge things and bigger than me, and also people who, have called me up 5 years ago asking for advice, who are now, have these phenomenal jobs and making their own way. And I don't want to sugarcoat it. Like, it's a scary time in the media industry, but there is so much growth potential for women's sports. And there is so much ability to make an impact and make a difference. And what a great time to be a part of this.
Yeah. We will be back a little bit later with some more from Lindsay. We're going to get into some of our controversial sports opinions, so stick around.
This past weekend was a huge one for women's sports, with both the WNBA and the NWSL starting their regular seasons, and so many games I did not know what to do with myself. But my very favorite part of the weekend was getting to watch the rookies make their regular season debuts. These young players came in with something to prove, and good lord did they prove it. Let's take a look at some of the hottest young talent in sports in a segment we call Rising Stars. Okay, so we're starting off with someone who's not actually a rookie. I know, I lied, but I promise it's relevant. Sofia Smith, folks. She had an absolutely massive game with the Portland Thorns in their season opener in Providence Park on Sunday. This was her regular season debut with the Thorns. She was drafted number 1 overall in the 2020 NWSL College Draft, but saw limited playing time last year due to a combination of COVID and some injuries that held her back in her true rookie season. But don't worry, she's officially good. She scored 2 of the Thorns' 5 goals against Chicago. One right off the bat in the 4th minute, and then another in the 30th minute when she combined with Adie Franch and Morgan Weaver for an absolutely gorgeous goal to put Portland up 3-0. Smith hasn't had much chance yet to live up to the hype that followed her entrance to the league last year as the first teenager ever to be drafted to the NWSL. But based on this performance, I'd say she's finally ready to show us what she can really do. And not a minute too soon, as she's still fighting to earn one of the super limited spots on the US Olympic roster. We've seen a little bit of Sofia Smith already, but I have a feeling she's just beginning to show us what she can really do in the NWSL. Moving over to the WNBA side, where the rookies were absolutely crushing it, and let me tell you, it was hard to choose just 2. We have Michaela Onyenwere of the New York Liberty. If you're trying to place her in your mind, she's the one with the grandma everyone was obsessed with during the draft. The number 6 overall draft pick set a New York Liberty record on Friday for most points scored in a debut when she made 18 points and shot 50% from the field against the Indiana Fever. Her second game of that series was pretty dang impressive too, when she got 11 points, 5 rebounds, and an assist to help finish off the Liberty's home sweep. They've already surpassed their win total from their 2020 season, by the way, so things are looking up in New York. Let's be honest, I give Ellie the Elephant most of the credit here. But Onyenwere made a pretty impressive mark on her first WNBA game, too. She looked confident and not at all like she was entering one of the most exclusive leagues in the world straight out of college. You have to understand that this league is wildly hard to get into. There are only 144 roster spots total, so even making the cut is an incredible accomplishment. But to make the cut and come in with that much poise is something special. And finally, you knew we were going to get here, Charli Collier. The number 1 overall draft pick out of Texas certainly earned that position last weekend when she put up a double-double in her WNBA debut. She got 11 points and 10 rebounds in the Dallas Wings opener against the LA Sparks, and also had a 19.6 rebound percentage, which in layman's terms means she was everywhere. You see double-doubles all the time in college, so this may not seem like much, but like I said before, the WNBA is a whole other level of elite. It is hard to put up big numbers like that in this league, and to do it in your first game, that's another story entirely. Everyone was waiting to see how Collier's play would translate into the pros, whether her style at Texas might give her a quieter debut. But I don't think we have to worry about that. She shot 4 of 6 from the field. She started, and did I mention she also had a double-double in the Wings preseason game? Dallas got a real prize in Charli Collier. Now we just have to wait to see how the rest of the league handles her. That was Rising Stars. We'll be right back with more from Lindsay Gibbs.
All right, we are back with Lindsay Gibbs. Lindsay, we talked a little bit about your podcast, Burn It All Down, before, and as we said, you guys are not afraid to talk about tough subjects on that show at all. So I'd love to play a game right now we call This or That. This edition of This or That is going to be called Burn It Down or Let It Stay. Because we like to stay on brand here. We want to...
I see what you've done there. Yeah.
Oh, you got to get it in there whenever you can.
I love it.
So very simple. Here's how it works. I'm just going to read out a controversial or arguable topic in sports. And we're both going to decide whether we want to burn it down or let it stay, and maybe talk about why or argue about it a little bit if we need to. But we can also just run through if we are in agreement, which I feel like might be the case sometimes here. We'll see. All right, here we go. No pressure. I'm feeling a little bit of pressure actually, and I know what the questions are. So, all right. Number 1, burn it down or let it stay. Offsides.
Burn it down. Burn it down.
No, I'm with you. I feel like burn it down or change it enough that it's not the thing that drives people away from soccer.
It's gotta be like, there's gotta be a grace period, right? Like there's gotta be a grace period. It's gotta be really obvious, right? Like you gotta be beating them by like seconds, right? None of this like
your elbow was in front of their
crossing
elbow.
The finish line. Like that's not what this is. That's not the spirit of the rule. So
it's all about the spirit of the thing. I 100% agree with you. All right. So burn it down. We're in agreement here.
Burn.
All right. Burn it down or let it stay. Ties.
Burn.
Burn.
The money needs to win. I don't understand ties.
I feel like that's such a I'm a volleyball player and we don't do that. But coming into soccer, I feel bad because they're like, it's part of the game. And I'm like, ugh, but does it have to be though?
It doesn't. And that's, the sports I've started, I started watching were, tennis and basketball and, you play till there's a winner. So that's just the way it is. I do understand. I mean, I get it, but I'm not really a fan of ties. I would like there to be a winner. Yeah.
I feel like just overtime, or you could do like hockey where they reduce the players on the ice for overtime to make it like more likely that you'll score. I like that idea, like something like that.
I mean, here's the thing, like, I think we're way too constricted with with like tradition and rules. Like, let's keep adapting things. Let's keep making them more exciting and more fun. And, overtime is a great time. And hockey, I give hockey credit for some evolution over the past.
In game, not so much.
Yeah, there's very limited.
We're working on it.
Evolution. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I'm like, we could do better. All right. Excessive celebration penalties.
Boo. Boo. Absolutely. What are we doing?
I'm big burn it down on this one.
Yeah, I mean, that's just like the whole point of sports is like outsized emotions.
Yeah.
Like,
especially soccer, when like maybe you're going to get 1 goal, 2 goals in a game, and then they like do a little celebration and get in trouble for it. I'm like, why do you think we're all here? We want to watch it. It's okay.
Baseball, when they like with the bat flips and stuff, it's just no.
I'm not just burn it down. Like, let's replace it with something better. I would like to institute a style point system so that like you do your celebration and then you could either hurt or help your team, like depending on the quality of your celebration, because then we get into a whole new like.
Yeah, I mean, like really, your points shouldn't count unless you celebrate properly. So
agreed. We need enthusiasm.
Yes,
it's very important. All right, classic one. So fun. We all love it. NCAA amateurism.
Yeah, I mean, burn.
I think we know where we're at on this one.
Burn. And, you know, it's falling in real time. So hopefully that will be ashes soon.
Yeah, this is a big time for that. Things are starting to crumble over in Castle NCAA, and I am kind of loving it. I'm not going to lie to you.
Yeah, I'm not crying any tears. So
it's okay. It's okay. All right. Baseball coaches wearing team uniforms.
I love it. They look so stupid, but it's funny.
I gotta let it stay for that one because I'm like, you do you. You're 50 years old. You like got a beer gut, and you're.
Love it. I actually like hate when coaches get too dressed up, like in games and stuff. Like I don't like that. Like I think in basketball, like they can overdo it sometimes. Like
the suits and pumps and stuff for women's coaches.
We don't need all of that. I've actually think COVID has changed that a little bit. Like a lot. I see a lot more basketball coaches going a little bit more casual, wearing the polos now. Yeah. And that's something, you know, look, I'm all for style and expression. So I think you either got to let them express style and everything, or they need to look like idiots. Actually, in like the baseball uniforms is so funny because they look so dumb.
I think we should make everyone do it. Like, I think we should institute across all sports just for like 1 week of like all coaches now have to wear their team uniforms.
I'm picturing Mike Tebow in the Mystics jersey now. This is great stuff.
Yeah. This is important to me, especially for like all the men who coach women's teams at high levels. Like they have to wear the women's uniform, like full. We're not making any adjustments. Volleyball spandex.
Look, I think just like once again, let's just change it up, you know? And if you're gonna wear suits and if you're gonna do, you know, if you want to dress up and that's what you wanted to do, you need to really just do it right. Like you need to put some actual style. I need to be entertained by whatever is happening over there because sports are entertainment.
Sports are entertainment. All right. Well, that's all we have with Lindsay for tonight. You can find her on social media. It's at Linz with a Z Sports. Make sure to subscribe to Power Plays newsletter. That's at powerplays.news. And check out the Burn It All Down podcast too, wherever you get your podcasts. That is our show, everybody. Thank you so much for watching She Plays Weekly. We'll see you next week.